Alright, let's dive in. Because history gets way more interesting when you realize even the scariest people ever were scared of some seriously random stuff. What's up everyone, I'm Marcus. And today we re-breaking down the secret fears of powerful historical figures you've definitely heard about, but probably never imagined this way. We're talking ruthless leaders, legendary minds, and global icons who terrified millions yet still jumped, panicked, or straight up avoided things most people deal with every day. Stick with me because the contrast is wild, and by the end, you'll see these larger-than-life figures in a totally different, almost uncomfortable light. Let's start strong with a name that instantly makes people tense: Adolf Hitler. The failed artist turned dictator who changed the course of history in the worst way. Hitler is remembered as one of the most brutal monsters of World War II, responsible for unimaginable suffering, destruction, and death across Europe and far beyond. But here's the weird twist behind the speeches, uniforms, and power trips. Hitler was terrified of something many toddlers also hate: going to the dentist. Yeah, the same man who commanded armies reportedly suffered from extreme dentophobia, an intense fear of dental treatment that controlled his behavior for years. After the war, documents described Hitler as a nightmare patient who avoided appointments, ignored serious problems, and only showed up when pain became unbearable. His dentist, Dr. Hugo Blaschke, said Hitler delayed care so long that his mouth was in terrible shape almost all the time. We're talking constant infections, painful abscesses, bleeding gums, and breath so bad it made people gag during conversations. In 1944 alone, near the end of the war, Hitler needed around 10 separate fillings because his teeth were completely falling apart. And when he finally needed a root canal, a procedure that usually takes about an hour, things got even more ridiculous. Hitler forced the dentist to stretch the treatment over more than 8 painful days because he couldn't handle the discomfort all at once. Imagine that for a second, one of history's most feared men shaking, whining, and panicking in a dentist chair like a scared preschool kid. It's unsettling, ironic, and honestly a little satisfying to picture, especially considering the terror he caused everywhere else. Now let's switch gears to someone who scared people for entertainment: Alfred Hitchcock, the mastermind behind classic horror and suspense films. Hitchcock basically taught the world how to feel uncomfortable on purpose, using camera angles, music, and silence to crawl inside your head. But even the king of suspense had something that freaked him out more than anything he ever put on screen. Hitchcock suffered from ovophobia, an intense and irrational fear of eggs, and I mean eggs absolutely ruined his day. He hated them so much that he refused to be in the same room as one, let alone touch or eat one. In a 1963 interview, Hitchcock described eggs as horrifying, especially the white round shape and the yellow center inside. He talked about them with genuine disgust, saying the yolk reminded him of something unnatural and deeply disturbing. To him, breaking an egg open was worse than watching blood, which he oddly described as more normal and even cheerful. Because of this fear, Hitchcock never ate eggs in any form. No omelets, no scrambled eggs, nothing at all. It is kind of hilarious that the man who created some of cinema's most terrifying scenes couldn't handle breakfast food. But maybe that intense sensitivity is exactly what made his movies hit so hard for audiences everywhere. Now let's talk politics, power and paranoia, because next up is Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States. At one point, Nixon seemed unstoppable, winning re-election in 1972 by a massive landslide and riding high on public support. Just 2 years later, everything collapsed when the Watergate scandal forced him to resign in complete disgrace. But long before that downfall, Nixon was dealing with a fear that quietly controlled many of his personal decisions. Nixon had a deep fear of hospitals, so strong that he avoided visiting sick friends and even close family members. This wasn't just discomfort either. It was full-on panic that made him believe hospitals were places people never returned from. In 1974, Nixon developed a dangerous blood clot, a condition that normally requires immediate hospital treatment to survive. Shockingly, he initially refused care, saying that if he went into a hospital, he believed he would die there. Eventually, doctors convinced him to go, and the treatment saved his life at the time. But here's the eerie part. Decades later, in 1994, Nixon suffered a stroke and passed away in a hospital anyway. That strange coincidence makes his fear feel unseeingly prophetic, even if it wasn't logical in the first place. Now let us rewind way further in time and talk about one of the most terrifying conquerors to ever walk the planet. Genghis Khan, the ultimate warlord of history. When people list the greatest and most brutal military leaders ever, Genghis Khan's name always sits right at the top without debate. During his lifetime, his conquests wiped out over 40 million people, reshaping entire civilizations through violence, fear, and absolute domination. Historians even estimate his campaigns reduced global carbon emissions by hundreds of millions of tons due to massive population loss. That's not praise, just a wild reminder of how powerful and destructive this man truly was. But here's the shocking part. Despite his ruthless image, Genghis Khan carried a fear that followed him quietly through life. He reportedly suffered from cynophobia, which is the intense fear of dogs. Some historians believe this fear came from a childhood incident where he was attacked or threatened by a dog. Whatever caused it, the fear was real enough to be recorded in ancient historical texts. In the secret history of the Mongols, the oldest surviving Mongolian written work, this fear shows up clearly. One story describes Genghis Khan being taken to meet the family he would eventually marry into. Before entering their home, his father warned them very seriously to keep their dogs under control. He reportedly said his son was afraid of dogs and should not be frightened by them. Keep in mind, these weren't tiny pets. Mongolian dogs back then were massive, aggressive, and trained to protect violently. Still, imagining the most feared man alive being nervous around dogs feels almost unreal. It's proof that even the deadliest warriors aren't immune to human fears. Next up, let's head to Russia and talk about Peter the Great, a ruler whose name still echoes through history books. Peter ruled in the late 1700s and helped turn Russia into a powerful European force through intense reforms. Today, many would label him a tyrant, but back then, fear and respect often meant the same thing. Despite his tough reputation, Peter had some fears that were honestly hard to hide. He suffered from entomophobia, the fear of insects, especially cockroaches. Peter hated cockroaches so much that he would immediately leave a building if he spotted one. Before entering any room, he demanded servants inspect and clean every corner to make sure no bugs were present. He even had staff constantly working to ensure insects never came near him in his own home. Once, while visiting a Russian officer, Peter found a cockroach and punched the officer in the face. That's how serious his fear was. Bugs weren't just gross to him. They felt threatening. Peter also had another unusual fear: high ceilings and wide open spaces. He avoided large palaces whenever possible and preferred smaller, tighter living spaces. When forced to stay in rooms with high ceilings, he had fabric hung lower to shrink the space visually. It's basically the opposite of claustrophobia, and it controlled how he traveled and lived. Honestly, if he were alive today, he'd probably skip massive mansions and hate open-concept houses. Now let us shift away from rulers and talk about one of the most important scientists who ever lived, Charles Darwin. Darwin changed how humanity understands life itself with his theory of evolution. After years of traveling the world and studying animals, he returned home and slowly withdrew from society. Darwin reportedly suffered from severe agoraphobia, the fear of leaving home and interacting socially. He also struggled with intense panic attacks that caused nausea, vomiting, headaches, and uncontrollable crying. As a young man, Darwin was adventurous and curious, constantly exploring new environments. But around age 28, his mental health began to decline dramatically. Over time, he avoided public speaking, meetings, and even social gatherings with colleagues. His fear became so strong that he initially declined a major leadership role in the Geological Society. This was a position most scientists would have done anything to get. Even after eventually accepting, Darwin wrote that speaking briefly made him sick for an entire day afterward. He spent much of his later life at home, working quietly, much like the tortoises he once studied. Despite these struggles, his ideas still reshaped science forever, showing fear doesn't cancel brilliance. Finally, let's end with one of the most secretive and controversial leaders of modern times, Kim Jong-il of North Korea. Kim Jong-il ruled one of the world's most isolated and oppressive governments with absolute control. But behind the propaganda and power, he carried a fear that seriously limited how he ruled. Kim Jong-il suffered from aerophobia, a deep fear of flying. At first, many assumed he feared being attacked mid-air due to his many enemies. But a Swedish diplomat later revealed the real reason behind the fear. In the 1970s, Kim Jong-il survived a helicopter crash that left him badly injured. The trauma stuck with him for life, causing nightmares and flashbacks. After that, he refused to ever fly again. No planes, no helicopters, nothing. Instead, he traveled using a heavily armored train whenever he left the country. In 2001, he traveled to Russia by train, a journey that took 24 days. That same trip could have taken less than 1 day by plane. It's wild to think how personal fear can shape world events in quiet ways. Because no matter how powerful someone looks, fear still finds its way in. Like the video and subscribe to my channel and don't miss an update.